So today I want to talk about something called the game design iteration spiral. Spirals usually used to denote something negative, like a downward spiral, or I'm spiraling. But here I think the spiral is quite a positive thing. So this is a metaphor that I think describes something important about game development. One of the questions that often comes up is, what do you start with? In board game design, the question is usually centered around, do you start with mechanics or do you start with theme? Do you make a completely abstract game like checkers, and then later on you decide, oh, actually this is a game about selling spices in 15th century Iran or something like that? Or do you start off with the 15th century Iran theme and then decide what game mechanics would model that situation? Ultimately, it ends up being a question less of which is better, because we can find examples of game designers that did either way and ended up with a brilliant game. But the thing that's important to think about, and the reason why I've kind of come up with this idea of the spiral, is that wherever you start, you are going to have to pass by and go through every other part of the game multiple times. Let's start with a circle first. Right, a circle is simpler. In that circle, we'll divide it up into the things that are important for a game. You can split this any way. In Jesse Schell's book, Art of Game Design, you get the elemental tetrad, which is 4 things that you need to think about in relation to any game you make, whether it's a video game, board game, whatever. And those are the aesthetics, like what does it look and feel like? The game mechanics, like how does it feel to play? The technology, which can be like anything to do with how is it coded, or the physical components of it. If it's a physical product, that's part of the technology as well. It can be the platform that it's played on, the input devices, all of that kind of stuff. And then the story setting theme, right? Now that's one way of thinking about the important parts of a game. Whatever type of game you're making, there will be a set of things that are important things to consider. And the reason I want you to think of a spiral is that as we develop a game, we're going to go through all of these elements and we're going to go through them over and over again. At the center of that spiral is a version of your game that can never exist. The perfect, the platonic ideal version of the game that you're working on. You can never really reach it. Leonardo da Vinci said, the art is never finished, it's just abandoned. You're going to go through iterative cycles of making and remaking your game. And every time you do that, you're going to go through all of these areas. You're going to tweak the art, you're going to tweak the code, you're going to change some game mechanics or some balancing. You're going to go through all of these things, and that's going to take you closer and closer to the center, the hypothetical center of the perfect version of the game that you're trying to make. But spirals never end. If you were drawing a spiral and you kept zooming in as you were drawing, you would never actually finish the spiral because it would keep spiraling into itself, because spirals are weird, man. You've got that target of the perfect version of your game, and you're going to just keep chasing that by going through all of these iterations in all of these areas of the game. And you're going to try and get closer and closer to that perfect game. And at some point, you're going to have to release your game and say, that will do, that's good enough. By getting closer to the center of the spiral, or at least further away from the edge of the spiral, you will have made a better game. Why do I think this is a helpful metaphor and not just a reason to draw lots of spirals? Well, the thing about a spiral is you have to go around the whole thing to pass down to the next iteration round. I see building a game as kind of similar to that. So the game I'm working on at the moment, I started from my technical and artistic limitations. I haven't done any hands-on programming for a while. I'm going to download a template for a particular type of game. I will set myself an art style that is very easy. So this kind of 24 by 24 pixel grid. I've set myself some constraints on my art style. All of the sprites will just be one color and black and nothing else. And then I will kind of get that working. So I've passed through 2 areas on one circle around the spiral. I thought about the technology side. What can I achieve with my current technology and my current programming skills, which aren't very much? Into the art side, what is the basic thing I can do that will allow me to kind of iterate quickly? Because I know I can make better art than this, but what I'm interested in at the start of this spiral is being able to get round the spiral quickly, being able to iterate fast. So I set myself a low target for what the art asset should look like so that I can iterate quicker through the other parts of the game and work out what it is. A few weeks into making this, I'm eyeballs deep in blueprints, and I realize I really like the room drafting mechanic in blueprints, and I've always liked sort of tile laying board games. I thought about how this could be actioned in a platformer, And then I thought about how when I played games like Terraria, I really like the idea of being in a platformer and having some sort of creativity and building something, but I don't like how fiddly it is to manage individual objects and a big inventory of stuff. I find that's a lot easier in a 3D game like Minecraft, and doing it in a little pixel art 2D game just felt very fiddly. I liked the idea of mixing together the room building, drafting, tile laying board game thing from Blueprints with a platformer, and I started to think about how mechanically that would solve a problem that I had with games like Terraria, which was that I find the idea fundamentally appealing. You know, I want to build and be creative in one of those games, but I want to do it in broad strokes. I don't want to like interact too much with individual blocks. So then because I'm making a very simple game based on like a 24 pixel tile grid, that allows me to sort of start experimenting with this mechanic of the room drafting. So I've been through all of these stages. And then let's come into the technology quadrant. I sort of know the basics of this game engine. I know how to make it do most of the stuff, but I was struggling with some physics bugs. I was also struggling with how to make my rooms work. Like this idea of being able to print rooms onto the map that were like pre-rendered in some way. So I ended up going on the Game Maker community on Discord, and I found someone had developed a library for doing exactly what I needed to do. Now this required me to get over my phobia of libraries. Like, I'm not too proud to put someone else's code in my project, quite happy to do that. I'm just a bit scared of it because I want to understand how it works. I reached out to them and said, well, actually I need to be able to flip my rooms, because if I open a door from the right, then the room needs to be flipped to the left. And the developer said, well, that's not a current feature in the stable build, but I'm working on it in the new one, so you can be a guinea pig for the new version. So not only did I have a problem solved by getting some code from elsewhere, I also ended up being able to help that person by being a sort of early tester for their library, a new version of their library. So that was nice. But to get to a build of this game that I think is sort of at a point where I'd be happy for people to playtest it, I'm having to go through this cycle several times. I make the art look a bit better. I make the mechanics work a little bit better. I fix some code. And then as I do it, I'm thinking about the theme and the story. Now, I haven't gone into this game with a very strong idea about my theme or story. I have a loose idea of it being this sort of mix of genres and like fairy tale and like bits of horror and stuff. And then as I'm going round the spiral and I look at what's there in terms of the existing art and the game mechanics, then I start to want to sort of justify certain game mechanics, like why do we build a world and then it goes away again. So I end up creating this like effect for when you finish a level where everything sort of tears down and explodes when you teleport back to the home. So then I'm thinking about like the narrative design of this element and why are we doing this run-based thing that kind of goes away every time. It disintegrates, like the integrity of it goes away and it all falls apart, which creates a really nice visual effect and then helps to explain why everything is going away. And again, this is something where I had to learn some new tech. So I'm like learning how to use the engine-based visual effects and particle effects and stuff, which I haven't really touched before. Like every time I wanted to do particle effects, I would just spawn a bunch of objects and throw them up in the air. I've been working on this game for like 3 months, and I've probably been round this spiral like 5 times, something like that. In terms of, you know, making a big set of changes to the game where I have to learn a new thing or consider a new thing in each of these areas of this game. And I would say that the majority of games that I get through on this channel to review and to play test, the games that I play and I feel like this game doesn't have a future, are usually a product of someone not working this way. And what I mean by that is that someone has 1 or 2 of these areas as their comfort zone, and instead of cycling through and going through all of the areas, they just plow towards the center in that area, right? So we get a game which has beautiful art assets, but those art assets don't move around, they don't kind of interact in a satisfying way, and the game mechanics just don't feel good. Or we have, you know, game mechanics that feel good, but the game is too buggy to actually play. This is going to be relevant if you're in a small team. It's going to be particularly relevant if you're a solo developer, because you're going to have a strength in one of these areas, one of these quadrants, however many pieces of the pie are in your pie, and the temptation is going to be to just stay in that lane and plow towards the center. But the thing is, you won't get closer to the center. The only way you get closer to the center is to ride the spiral. Because what's at the center is the perfect version of your game, right? The perfect version of your game is not buggy. The perfect version of your game has interesting game mechanics that work and feel good. The perfect version of your game has a setting or theme that is interesting to people, helps make the game make sense. The perfect version of your game looks good in some way. It might be very minimalistic, it might have like some kind of childish, charming art style, but it should be visually appealing in some sort of way. If you try and just stay in your lane and plow towards the center, you will not get any closer to a good version of your game, because in order to get closer to a good version of your game, you have to improve it in all of these ways constantly, a little bit at a time. So hopefully, if nothing else, if you're making a game right now, this video might serve as a little bit of a motivator, a little bit of a kick up the bum, if you have areas of your project that you've been neglecting. Like, you've used a bunch of placeholder assets and you've never really thought about the art style, and you know that the game looks a bit drab, and maybe just like certain types of shaders, or having a bit more of a think about the overall color palette of the game, like the type of stuff that is art direction rather than like hands-on art skills. Like, spending a week just focused on that might make your game feel a million times better than what you've been sitting with for a long time, because you have this area that you're kind of scared of and you're like, oh, I don't do that thing. But in order to get closer to the center of the spiral, you have to ride the spiral. Riding the spiral means holistically caring about all the parts of your game. I think fundamentally, if you want to make a game entirely on your own and you can't do that, you just say, well, I'll just do my best, but I won't really think about the art, or I don't really mind about those bugs because it's the best I can do. You might as well just not make a game, or make a different game, make a simpler game that makes a better use of your skills. The time that you spend making games is inherently valuable as long as you are learning something and having fun. But if you want those games to do well, if you want other people to care about those games, if you want your game to even be interesting enough that someone else wants to play test it, let alone buy it, then you need to ride the spiral.